Hey YouTube, this is Code Zephyr coming back years later with a very different kind of video. As the video title should suggest, I have a lot of problems with the AI industry and its knock-on effects on society. I don't view the displacement of all knowledge workers over the next few years as a cultural good, just as I was opposed to the unauthorized use of artist work in the past couple of years. As a mid-level Fang developer, I read from accelerationists that my job is doomed within the decade, within the year, and within months, just as I read from critics that AI is detrimental in practice, or even that it's just a fancy autocomplete. My goal with this series is to see for myself from a critical but not hopium-laden perspective. To do this, I'd like to skip past demos, which have been a prominent part of the AI hype train, and go directly to shipping products, which I feel is a more realistic test. I'm using what I understand to be the cutting edge, Claude Opus 4.6, and for the first project, I've picked something that AI could plausibly one-shot, a small browser plugin. The browser plugin that I'm planning on implementing today is something that I've thought would be useful for quite a while, which is the ability to Ctrl or Command F through a page and highlight every word that you see. But beyond Ctrl F, I would like it to persist across pages. So I could have that same Ctrl F applied directly when I land on looseism or whatever. And then I would also like it to be able to handle multiple terms. So I could search for plumage and also wings, for example. So that's kind of what I'm planning. And the first thing I'm going to try to do is see if it can one-shot it. So I'm just going to give it a well spelled out version of my idea and then see if it does it in one go. And if it doesn't quite, then I can step through it with it on planning, perhaps give it a starter code base like this one that I like. And also then go through the implementation detail by detail. So let's see how that goes. First, let's try the one shot. Okay, so here we are in VS Code with Claude, and I do have it set to the best, which is Opus 4.6, and we're in max, so we should have enough tokens. If max 5x isn't enough, I'll go to 20x. But yeah, so we are in branch one shot, and once I see what it can do, if we need to keep going, I will create a new branch and try to do the orchestrated version. But I have created this prompt, so here I'll just paste it in. So Claude, please create a browser plugin which can deploy to Firefox and Chromium-based browsers. It is similar to Ctrl F, string search, and web page. I would like to be able to highlight search term word 1 wherever it appears on the web page, and I also want 2 additional features: multi-search term input. I'd like to be able to add and remove search terms, e.g. word 2, word 3, and allow up to 5 at any given time. I should be able to clear them one at a time or all at once. When cleared, the UI should shrink to avoid taking up the unnecessary space, and each search term should be highlighted in a different color. Cross page. I would like for the search to persist across pages until I dismiss it. E.g., if I'm on a web page 1 and run the search across these terms, and then I navigate to a new page, I would like it to rerun the search in the new page until I explicitly close or dismiss the search. You can choose whether it's dismissible modal that pops up on keyboard command, or a button clicked in the toolbar, or both. And ideally, I would like it to also allow navigation up and down between term instances, but you can hold off on that, implementing that if you foresee this being difficult to implement immediately. So yeah, fair enough. And ask for edits, edit automatically. Let's do edit automatically and just see where it goes. It might ask me a couple questions, but I don't think so. Here we'll see me skip forward through some of the code generation. I'll do that quite a lot throughout the video to save on time. But it did take 1 minute and 10 seconds to come up with a plan, and then it took another 2 minutes upon approval to actually generate the code. So I've just reviewed what it came up with for the plan. For, I don't know if you'd say the architecture, but the plan. It does have some UI stuff. I think this came up in my research, so it makes sense. Using Manifest v3 web extension. Activation makes sense. Ctrl Shift F, that's actually kind of what I was thinking of. Add term, it came up with a good UX, including some stuff I didn't specify, like having a colored dot, which probably indicates the associated color. Maybe you could change it. Probably not. It'll probably be automatically assigned, which makes sense. I'm curious to see if the highlighting engine, does it in O of n or O of 5n, if there's 5 search inputs. Hoping for O of n. It does seem like it ambitiously is going to try for navigation. It has a good use of cross-page persistence. And it uses Shadow DOM, which I don't actually know much about. So I'm glad it came up with that. And it gives some verification steps, which of course is going to be crucial. Finally here we'll see the first issue introduced. While this would have probably worked right off the bat with Chrome, it actually fails in the context of Firefox. It misconfigures the manifest.json. So you'll see me run into the bug and then work with Claude to get it fixed. Okay. Alright. Okay, running. Wow. Okay, and now I assume I do Command Shift F. It didn't work. Here we'll see the next bug introduced, which is that the key binding Command Option S, which didn't conflict in Chrome, does conflict in Firefox, and it doesn't work. So that needs to be rebound. So here you see me fixing that. Wow. Cool. Add term. Raven. Wow. Add term. Wing. So let's see, this one's orange. That's maybe not the best. Wow. That's awesome though. It's a little scary. Alright, so now we have wing. Let me just do some really basic one that should be. Wow. Duh. Alright, so that should be everywhere. Here you'll see me performing validations, and although these all pass, the next section is going to be detailing different UX improvements and little bugs that were found, and then tackling them one by one. Okay, so I've let it run and it's generated the product. I ran into a couple issues with loading. At first debugging didn't work right off the bat, and subsequently the key to bring it up failed, but since then I've gotten it to work. So now it is Ctrl Shift F to pull it up, and then you can type in, crow. That'll add that. You can search there, and then you can add in, call. So now it actually has this additional feature of counting the number of instances, and we are able to navigate through them. Although I see that it started at 1, even though we were lower than that. I have noticed that it is not able to navigate up or bring us to a later part in the screen. You can only sort of navigate down. So that's one improvement. Navigate up. Brings us to final occurrence. Backwards navigation. Additionally, I've noticed that you can just have a bunch of empty terms, which feels a little bit weird. Empty search terms are auto closed on blur. collapsing filled terms up. So in other words, if I close out of search term 1 and leave it empty and then blur it and focus on some other element, call should go up to search term 1 and everything else should close. Now let's see if I open another one. It remains up, which is really great. And it made some choices, like it's not synchronized across pages. So if I now make this one specific, Raven and call and close this one, if I go back to this one, it'll still be the same, which I think makes sense. I don't want to over engineer it and like make it exactly what you really specify what the user should be doing. Because at this point you might want it to fork and have two different behaviors. So I think that makes sense. And now maybe in the future choosing the color would be nice. And there's some other behavior, like right now, if I search crow, press enter, it'll take me to the first occurrence. I think I would prefer it to now allow you to add another term and allow you to navigate between instances with the up and down arrows. So enter focuses new term addition field, use up and down arrows to navigate between occurrences. I can never spell occurrences. And then, additionally, if I collapse the input using escape, it de-highlights everything. But if I collapse it and it removes all the search terms, which I think for now I want, maybe that'll change in the future. But if I collapse it by clicking on the icon, it stays highlighted. So clear inputs on collapsing by clicking icon. But overall, yeah, this is like worryingly quite good. So I'm going to, I was thinking I might try a one pass and then move over to a more orchestrated version. And I think I would do that for an enterprise product where I needed to be very familiar with all of the code. But in this case, because it's going to have a limited feature set and then be done, I think I can leave it like this and work with it. So I will treat this as the base, add all of this. First pass functioning version. I will treat this as the base, and then I will work from this. So I will add the fixes that I've listed here, and I'm also going to go verify that it works on Chrome as well, because obviously it didn't work quite the first time on Firefox. And I will also do an architectural review here shortly. But yeah, that's my plan. Very impressive. Improvement number 1 listed here is navigating up should bring us to the final occurrence. It seemed in some cases that navigating backwards was not actually moving the screen. I think I found out the reason for this. If you'll notice, I'm scrolling backwards and forwards here, and it's not moving, and that's because it's actually trying to look for the terms in here. If we expand it, it is actually moving. So I do want to see if we can skip non-visible terms, but I think this is going to be a bit more difficult. This is a sort of custom DOM tag. I'm not sure if there's like another property called visible to human user or something like that that Opus could take advantage of. So I might skip to doing this one later, and I might first tackle this one. Empty search terms are auto-closed on blur. Okay, so I don't think I worded this very well to Claude, but I'm basically saying I would like empty boxes to collapse on blur, and additionally I do want them to keep the same color. So if we have search term in box 2 and that's a color yellow, and then it collapses to box 1 which is currently red, I don't want it to become red and shift the DOM. I want the first box to now be associated with yellow, and now the next one that can open up can be red. So I'm hoping it will figure this one out. Let's see. Wow, it's really going hard here. This is thinking for feels like longer than the first pass. It turns out this adjustment did take a few seconds longer than the original entire implementation, which suggests it practices some caution when it's changing existing code. Okay, so it's been done. 506 line change. Okay, I'm not going to pretend I fully understand what's happening here. Let us reload. Okay, close. Maybe it's a little bit broken. I'll just reload the page. All right. Ctrl Shift F. Crow. Raven. And erase this. And now Raven. So blue should now jump to, after I blur, blue should jump to search term 1, and yellow should probably, I'm not going to be tied to it, but should probably be the next one that gets opened up. All right, so now it's still blue. Excellent. And crow. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, cool. Let's kind of stress that a little bit. Oh, interesting. Okay. I think it should just, it shouldn't break it. Once it's added, it should just prevent it from being added. So here. Field with another is currently empty. It appears momentarily before collapsing. Can you instead gray the term functionality when an empty box exists? Yeah. Is it running? Yeah, that didn't quite work. I wonder if it's maintaining terms that aren't visible, that don't have text. Has empty terms, some T does not have text. It doesn't appear to work. It allows input into first visible field, but allows input into first visible field, but no more terms. Even though highlighting works, no further terms can be added. Button doesn't appear. Nice. Right. Now, update action buttons runs on every keystroke via the input event. Okay. Plus term appears as soon as you type into an empty field and hide again if you clear it. So what was the issue? Yeah, let's see. Oh, well, let's just see if it works real quick. I can already see it's I actually kind of like doing code reviews, and I just can't be bothered. Okay. It's just so much code. Alright, that worked. And that still navigates between them. Add term. Yeah. Okay, cool. Hello. Yeah, nice. So I think it should give you an indication that something is off with the UX. So I think it should actually gray out at term. Alright, as always, I have to just fully reload it because now it's kind of broken. Alright, crow. Add term. Does not work. Keyboard up, down does. And this is much better than enter. I'm loving it. Here I discovered that enter is not adding terms as expected. Previously it had been used to navigate between terms, but that's now been rebound to the up and down keys. So enter is not supposed to add terms, but it's failing to do so, although the add term button itself still works. So next I go ahead and solve that. Okay, now we have one remaining. Navigate up should bring us to the final occurrence backwards navigation. Okay. Let's see. I want to actually use plan mode for this one, maybe. Last issue. Yeah. This might be a problem. Display none, visibility hidden, opacity 0. No, okay, collapse sections. Alright, we'll see. Should be quite a bit lower. Count. Wow. Here you see me validating the fix, and it worked. First pass. Nice. Okay, so I have asked Claude about publishing it to Firefox, and they discussed doing a manual review, and it made me realize I should probably check for any security issues. There is not too much. There was a couple of potential bugs that it flagged. I kind of figured this one on my own, but basically each keystroke triggers run highlight and does a full scan of the entire page, and so you can imagine this slowing it down at a certain point because every single input is triggering this whole thing, and then now it's gonna make the next key input lag. So I had it fix that, which does work. And there's a race condition on panel init, which I haven't yet tested, but it has supposedly fixed, where one of the actions is asynchronous. And if you first load a page and then you try to, if you trigger its summoning before it actually exists, it could cause it to fail out. So it's fixed that in theory. I'll just try to really quickly hit Command-Option-S right after reload and see if that works. It does, so that's good. The other thing I like, if I type really fast, you can see it does actually take a little, like a 1/10 of a second before it loads, so that's proper. I also did notice that it really does slow down if you do like A, E, I, O. You see it's kind of laggy at this point, which is to be understood. It actually still works pretty well, but it definitely does become laggy as I'm inputting here. Yeah, but I did also check to see that highlighting still works, and it does. So at this point, I'm going to probably implement this maintainability change, check to see if this is relevant, and once that's done, I will actually submit it to Firefox. Okay, so bit of an architecture review. I've asked it to provide me an architecture review so that I could hopefully grok it a little bit quicker and then go over it. But it has nice elements. It definitely has some commenting. It uses composition with a lot of these functions, as you can see here, which is quite helpful. As of yet, I mean, in fairness, I haven't requested it to do anything else, which I'll test in a little bit. But as of yet, everything is all in one mega file. It's pretty hard for a human to understand, considering how relatively simple this is. As we can see here, the CSS is added in the same JS file, and then the actual UI itself is inserted in, as they say, the shadow DOM to avoid CSS conflicts, and it's added in sort of ad hoc here. I don't know about ad hoc, but manually, not using an HTML file. And it has it sort of inserts rows as they're created, so it also does HTML manipulation elsewhere as we render rows, essentially. So there's a lot of inline JavaScript inline HTML manipulation, which would not be my preference. Additionally, you can see we sort of create a lot of elements in sequence. So my preference would have been for CSS to be in CSS files, for HTML to be in HTML files, and to use object-oriented programming. I mean, for a simple use case, this makes sense, but even the first pass, before adding any of the fixes, was complex enough that I would have done object-oriented programming to separate out the logic. So that's what I'm feeling right now. It does kind of instruct you, I mean, having spoken with Claude over here, it shows you how the background JS has this, adds a listener that then interacts with this to toggle the panel, and then how you can get to that from a couple of different inputs. There's also, like, of course, the keyboard event listener right here, and escape to clear everything. The functions as of now are pretty well named, but I do notice also that it, from what I can tell, it does handle each term and crawl the entire DOM for each term separately, as well as it does track all terms and filter. So I think it tracks all of the terms, generally speaking, but for counting and for navigating, it filters out non-visible ones. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily efficient. I suppose that would mean that when you do expand terms and they become visible, then that does mean that they would be highlighted, which might be nice. It also does do this thing where it replaces the node with a fragment. So it takes the text node, makes it into a fragment, and that's a highlighted example of the exact same text. And then when you clear it, it goes in and replaces them all with text again. I'm not sure the performance implications of having so many inserted document fragments. But on the other hand, I, Ctrl F, and I had a few other terms active at the same time, and it worked fine. But I do have an M2 Mac. I don't know if somebody with an older sort of machine might run into trouble with some of that. But I think it's sufficient for now. So yeah, I would just say, yeah, great function composition, great naming, but at least without instructing it to do otherwise, it has a tendency to make a God class and make something that is, for a human, pretty difficult to parse, even for this kind of toy example. So, although I am very impressed by its capabilities, I do think that my initial assertion that working on an existing code base, you're going to want pretty close human supervision. But with that said, let's give it a chance. Here you see me start asking Claude to re-architect in an object-oriented fashion. For example, each input could be an instance of a class that is able to go up, down, count instances, and clear itself. But then I decide that it's probably a lot to ask at this point in the development. So I just pivot to saying, hey, let's get some separation of concerns. So we could have HTML in one file, or definitely CSS in some other file, and then we could have maybe the logic split up in a few different ways. Okay, my request is please re-architect this app with respect to separation of concerns, move initialization logic into its own file, in-use logic into another, so that's like after it's already existing on the DOM, but while I'm performing various keyboard options. And then separate out CSS and HTML as much as possible from JS. I mean, CSS should be pretty easy, but HTML might be a lot tougher, so that's why I said as much as possible. Okay, let's see what it's got. It is working on it. So we have some separation concerns. So panel CSS, panel HTML, okay. State, that is one thing I forgot to mention. State, at least previously, was just stored in a few local variables, which I guess is fine. Right here. This is where a lot of the state was held. But now that's separated out. Highlighter, yeah, I think that's a pretty major component that should be split off. Entry point init.js, I don't mind that. Let's see how it's going. We've got a ways to go. Okay, let's see what we have. Content CSS, unchanged. Highlighter. So this is where we get the reference to the same state. So now we're adding functions to that original window. Still not my favorite syntax. It's very functional, which I don't think is amazing, but I'll take it. Here you'll see me speed past a few other optimizations I worked on with Claude, including rebinding the keys to Command Option S, and also renaming the app. Just a few things that are intended to make the little plugin more usable and accessible for potential users down the line. I think now I'm just going to go try to get this pushed to Firefox. This isn't really the part I was intending to demonstrate. So I will just go get this published, and meanwhile I will also get this pushed up to GitHub. So I'll be back after that. So I'm going to have it fix this quite easy little, just basically using a string const instead of replicating the same string in a few different files. And I think it's going to exceed 100% context. So now we're going to have to compact. So what that means, I believe, is that modern models are only able to take in so much context in tokens, and at some point it needs to compactify it. So it's going to basically try to summarize everything that we've done, so that we can now keep adding more context. So it's going to run to that here, I should imagine. And then we'll see how that works. With ChatGPT, I've experienced conversations slow down to a crawl. So I guess this is what it should actually do instead of just infinitely slowing down. Here you see me discover the most surprising bug that Claude generated, which is that it sets a const equal to itself, having not first set that const equal to a string. So it actually evaluates to undefined. And what this means is, I believe the app still works, but it would conflict if any other undefined value were set to the same storage location. This bug surprised me with how visually obvious it is in the code versus some of the other ones which are in the UX or are just kind of extreme edge cases. Okay, so compaction just triggered, which was interesting for anybody who's not familiar with AI, having done that in the past. It did occur and it summarized everything, and it's interesting. It summarizes it enough for it to pick up again, and it also stores the entire conversation locally in case it needs any specific information. I was a little worried about losing data forever, but that's a great solution to make it perform faster, but also be able to search through the entire unedited conversation. I also did ask it a question that I was a little bit confused about, which is that it had set the storage key equal to its own. It set this constant equal to this constant, which seemed like a bug to me. It actually ran, but that didn't seem correct. And it responded by stating that it was a good catch, it's a bug, or could have potentially been a bug and was not the intended behavior. So now it's been adjusted back. And I also discussed the potential security hole that it had brought up, and it doesn't look like it's something that can be adjusted, at least not trivially. So I'll just leave it as it is for now. And it's not a very big security hole. It just means that malicious scripts can determine whether or not this plugin is being used. by a user. But this plugin doesn't have any real privacy concerns. It doesn't have any secret data or anything like that, so it's not a concern unless the functionality expands significantly. And even then, it's still not a guarantee that an interested party could actually do anything with the fact that there's this plugin. So, can move on. Hey all, it's been a few days since I did the initial vibe coding, but I wanted to show cross-page multi-search in its final form, approved on the Firefox plugin store, before moving on to conclusions. So it now has key bindings for macOS and for Windows. And upon summoning it with Command Option S in Mac, you can now see that there's this cross-page option. So I realized that a lot of people would maybe want multi-term search, but without it persisting across pages, which was originally my conception of it. But for example, I could do Hyperion, and I could do Pilgrim, and then I could go over to a new page with cross-page disabled. It'll be closed. But if I enable cross-page, it will open in the new page. And then if I hit close all when it's synchronized, it'll close the plugin on the other page as well, the modal. Whereas if it's not in cross-page mode, it will just close the one on that page. So I think it's something I'm pretty satisfied with. I'm definitely going to use it. And if anybody else wants to use it, again, it's called cross-page multi-search. And I'll be adding it to Chrome too. I'll add some details in the video description. With everything built, let's wrap up with some vibe coding impressions. To start, the successes. So Claude Opus was nearly able to one-shot a useful product, and in fact for Chrome it basically did one-shot a useful product, just had some issues with Firefox at the edges there. And it was immediately more useful from first pass than the basic Ctrl F is for my use case, and it had some UX refinements that it needed, but pretty impressive stuff and definitely surpassed my expectations. And my expectations were fairly high, so that's saying something. It made some elective improvements, like adding the term instance count beside each term, like how many of them were found on the web page, and also adding the little associated highlighter color, which I didn't request, but were you could obviously see how they were useful. And in fact, for me, debugging wise, they were immediately useful. So that was really great. It made a visually appealing UX. I mean, to me, it looked better than the web pages it was hovering over, oftentimes, right off the bat, without any specification on my part. And yeah, I don't know to what extent it's generic. Maybe it makes a lot of things look similar to that by default, but it definitely looks great. It was a good starting point. It also had great naming and good composition of functions. So as the names, they were not too long and verbose, and they were not too short and unclear. They were sort of in that Goldilocks zone. And that allowed human reviewers, like myself in this case, to understand it at a better level and for better composition, because you can intuit what they're supposed to mean. And in fact, you could see Claude using the function names in its thinking process and how it was going to compose them together and leverage previously defined functions. And finally, Claude Opus's personality, if you can call it that, was easy to work with. It interpreted instructions well. You sort of didn't misinterpret anything. It was honest if it made any mistakes. And it had fairly good tooling to monitor its actions, like the ability to see its the thought process if you wanted to, or collapse it if you didn't care, and also to do plan mode or edit automatically or upon review. So that was great. Some missteps for sure. There were some bugs. It misconfigured the manifest for Firefox on the first pass. I mean, it was fine for Chrome, but not Firefox. It had a key binding clashing in Firefox on first pass. It broke the add term when implementing contextually disabled add term. So like if there's an empty input, add term should be disabled. And it also broke that again with enter. This was kind of the biggest sticking point, was the UX around adding terms. And then close from icon didn't clear highlighted words, so that was to say that escape would clear all highlights, but if you closed by directly clicking the icon, it wouldn't. And then the biggest and most clear one was that setting const equal to itself. So it literally set const equal to itself, and itself was of course undefined, so it set a const equal to undefined, which was a pretty obvious bug even from a human reviewer perspective, so that was one of the more surprising ones. It made some questionable decisions. including user invisible search terms. That is to say, terms that were not visible on the page to the human, but were to a bot. So they were in like collapsed sections in the search. So it makes sense for a bot, but not for human, which is interesting. The add item button being usable when invalid. So it would just like, you could click it and it would add one and then it would immediately collapse. That was some kind of bad UX. Enter navigating between terms. So scrolling up and down the page rather than using the up and down arrows to navigate. So that makes sense if we just had a single term. So if it was Ctrl F, essentially, that would make sense. Enter navigating between the terms. But in a context of adding multiple terms, that doesn't make any sense anymore. And then setting inner HTML blindly was one that it found, which was an issue. And then, so yeah, my summary of this was that, first of all, default architecture is not scalable. It just made this one big God class and didn't separate HTML and CSS, and it had all the logic in one file, and it was sort of sequentially ordered. And I think that's not really scalable. So I think if you want something to scale a little bit better, you're going to have to take some more direct input at the beginning. It made some UX choices which make sense from a bot, but not a human perspective, as you can see over there, like the terms, of course. From a human perspective, you're not going to want to care about terms that are not visible on the page, most likely. It made some errors which correspond with non-mainline use. So this is kind of one of the theories I'm operating under. Like the more typical your use case is based on the training data that the LLM has, the more perfect it's going to be. So Firefox is obviously not as mainstream as Chrome, so you're going to have more issues with Firefox. And then finally, it generated and introspected some small potential bugs and missed that one larger bug. And as I said, that larger bug was the const one. So in sum, when creating a moderately simple tool that you are certain is not going to grow beyond original scope, a single well-phrased prompt is sufficient to get a working starting point. No need to iterate. So I thought for something of this scope, even this, you would want to have some back and forth, some planning mode, maybe define the files. But my conclusion now is that you don't need to do this. You can just fire it off and forget it. It'll make something that's good enough to start with and may even just nail it in one. However, when you're creating a project that is expected to grow, you'll need multiple phases, including planning, architecture, iterating through features and final bug and security inspection. Otherwise, the app will not scale well. So yeah, this is for more serious projects. You should have a lot more control right from the beginning. And in the future, I hope to sort of explore this case more often. Whereas, of course, the one we just did was the first case. And finally, Claude Opus does not currently make perfect UX decisions and can cause bugs when refactoring, as I witnessed both of those. So code review sufficient to fully understand generated code is still required for serious projects. That is to say, I do think there needs to be a fair amount of human intervention. Some caveats with my summaries. The API prices, as I understand, are actually currently suppressed for monthly users. Like, we are getting a cheaper deal in part because of VC dollars. So in the future, when those dollars go away, we'll either need to sacrifice on model quality by using one like Sonnet, for which you'd get worse results, or you'll need to spend more money than we're experiencing at present. And then if using niche coding languages and frameworks, expect worse results. Like, I'm just using JavaScript, HTML, CSS here, which is really generic. If you're doing some niche Scala, ETL, I don't know, something, then you can expect worse results. So I'm saying that my results here were kind of best case scenario. On the other hand, Opus 4.6 is the best model we're going to have for the rest of our lives. So perhaps you can expect better results, actually. So for my next steps, I want to test requesting scalable architecture from the start. I mean, I didn't, and so I had some complaints about the architecture, but maybe that's just because I should have specified. And then testing a startup prompt. I mean, this used to be relevant. I don't think it still is, but it might be worth seeing. Testing a prompt like, you are a principal software engineer who loves clean code, and then seeing if that makes the output code significantly better. And then testing a non-greenfield project. So obviously it had complete control from the start here, and it would be interesting to give it a project such as perhaps my COVID project that I got 80% done with, but just didn't wrap up. It would be nice to test how it does with pre-existing code. And in fact, I think that code was from a while ago, so it wasn't my favorite. So it would be nice to see it work on substandard code. And then backend code. Obviously, this was some front-end stuff. And of course, that's because it's easier to deploy, but it would be worthwhile to test with some backend code. And then finally, having done some of those, I would like to see how much I can test with developing with AI in a sustainable way. Like how fast can I get a speed boost and still maintain control and understanding of the code and not have an unstable application basically. So hopefully I'm going to take those learnings and move forward with that. But yeah, so that's all I've got for today. And thanks everybody for watching, and CodeZephyr out.